continues.
Congressman Brad Sherman, Democrat from California, represents the 27th District and ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Terrorism Subcommittee, here to talk about strategy toward Afghanistan and Pakistan. Let's first begin with the briefing that you and others received in the Capitol yesterday from Leon Panetta and others. What did you learn?
Well, not much more than is in the newspaper. I expressed a concern that we had been explicitly and repeatedly saying that Pakistan didn't know that we were going in. Now, that's maybe true, but just because it's true doesn't mean you have to say it. And so my concern is why we were rubbing the noses of Pakistani citizens in the fact that their sovereignty was violated and their military was unable to do anything about it. And I don't think the answer was classified, but it was unremarkable, so I won't get into it.
Well, why was it unremarkable? I mean, you can just talk about it in generalities.
Well, I just don't think that a lot of thought went into how to deal with the obvious question. I mean, it's one of the very first questions that everybody asked. And I think on the emotional side, there's some real anger toward Pakistan in the upper reaches of the American government, which is justifiable, but not a reason for doing what would have been the alternative, which would be ambiguity or simply a refusal to state whether Pakistan had been informed.
It's the question on the front page of the Chicago Sun-Times. Did Pakistan know? Given that many people inside the government, members of Congress, are saying it just defies logic that they didn't know, or at least some people within their government. Do you share that sentiment?
Well, I think there's a spelling mistake in the Chicago Sun-Times and every other newspaper, because it's got the word Pakistan without an S at the end of it. Pakistan's not a singular entity. It's a schizophrenic superpower, or schizophrenic nuclear power. Anytime you get the word schizophrenic and nuclear right next to each other in a sentence, you got a problem. The fact is, there were elements of Pakistan that I'm sure knew, and there were elements that did not. I mean, you've got to start with, why would bin Laden build his $1 million compound down the street from the West Point of Pakistan? He must have thought, he must have been told that this was a safe place to be cocooned with the Pakistani military.
So what does that mean for aid for Pakistan going forward? Should we continue? Can we afford to continue?
This is one of the few elements of federal expenditure where I think the budgetary situation shouldn't be guiding. This is the most dangerous situation in the world. You've got a nuclear power that is clearly schizophrenic and has elements in it that, while may not be Al-Qaeda, or at least Al-Qaeda sympathetic, the aid has got to be carefully given, only to the right forces, only for the right reasons, and only in return for expected results.
The figure ranges from 19 billion, 18 billion over the years that we have given to Pakistan. What have we gotten for our money?
Well, on the plus side, we've seen no use of Pakistani nuclear weapons over the last 20 years, or since they were invented and developed, more than 20 years. We have had some exchange of information. Young people have come up with this word frenemy, and I didn't know what it meant because I don't, I'm not on Facebook, but well, my press secretary has a page for me on Facebook, but I'm not part of the Facebook generation. But now I understand. I mean, we're talking about frenemistan.
So then, what kind of ties should be placed on this money? How do you, because you said, it should be carefully distributed.
Element by element. First, any of the economic aid needs to be widely publicized in Pakistan. Many people involved in aid or emergency aid or economic aid are so interested in the economic result and helping people on the ground, and that's what they should do, that they won't put the flag on the bag. That is to say, if you're distributing a bag of food, they won't put the American flag on it. They resist that or they cover it up. And that's short term. Yes, that may meet the needs of today distributing the food or today doing the economic development project. But Instead, and even if it poses difficulties for the economic project, everything we do has got to be widely publicized.
You're on the Foreign Affairs Terrorism Subcommittee. What did you hear yesterday in the briefing about heightened alert in this country coming from threats overseas?
Well, the briefing was mostly on foreign policy. What concerns me right now is just the lone wolf. And frankly, that's a risk we always had, but somebody who might have or might not have done something on their own 6 months from now may be trying to do it in the next 6 days. And so we have a heightened alert. I think on balance, this makes us safer, even if we're not safer this week. We're going to be safer this year. We're going to be safer in the years to come.
If you're concerned about lone wolf, what does that mean for Patriot Act extension?
Well, we're always concerned about lone wolf, the franchised operations of Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda itself. With the heightened concern about lone wolf is a matter of weeks, and as you may know, nothing happens in that building over there in a matter of weeks. So I don't think this is going to affect Patriot Act extension.
What about foreign relations going forward? What do you think the ramifications are of the capture, the death, excuse me, of Osama bin Laden?
Well, it's going to help us roll up Al-Qaeda. It's going to create fissures in that organization. I'm not sure that Zawahiri is going to have the charisma, the standing to keep the whole organization together. It's not even an organization so much as a franchise. I think that it boosts our stock worldwide. Something worked. We accomplished something militarily that no other country could have done, both in terms of the intelligence and the raid itself. So it makes us look like a superpower.
What about how we address the Taliban in Afghanistan? Front page story in the Washington Post that some are saying this puts us in a better negotiation place with the Taliban.
It puts us in a better negotiation place because we are viewed as stronger. Also, some of the loyalties in the Middle East are not to ideology, not to organization, but very personal. And so the relationship between the Afghan Taliban and Al-Qaeda are now a little less strong. And obviously, when we first went into Afghanistan, the idea that we would be viewing as success a coalition government between Karzai and the Taliban, we were aiming much higher.
All right.
But now negotiations with elements of the Taliban make sense.
Let's go to Robert, Republican. First phone call here for Congressman Brad Sherman in Salisbury, North Carolina. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask this question. You know, we're paying.
Yeah, Robert, we're listening, all right? You got to turn that television down.
Okay. Well, we're paying Pakistan, my understanding, $12 billion a year to take and do this fight tour. And all these countries get blowed up. People get blowed up every day with people firing bombs and everything else. You would think that they would want to protect their own country. Why should we have to pay them to help us to fight this?
Let's leave it there.
Mm-hmm. First, the amount of aid is much closer to $4 billion, really 4.3. A little less than half of that is economic aid, more than half is security aid. If Pakistan was doing the right things, the fact that they were doing them for themselves as well as us would fully justify the aid. If Pakistan motivated out of its own, the current president is the widower of Benazir Bhutto, who was killed by terrorists. So you're right, Pakistan should be doing all the anti-terrorism work for its own reasons. But if they were doing a good job of it, $4 billion in aid to help them do it would make a lot of sense. There are elements in the Pakistani government that are very cooperative. There are elements that want to build a moderate anti-terrorist Pakistan. Those elements deserve our aid. But you can't just throw money at the Pakistani government and hope it gets to the right places.
Let's go to Manhattan. Evelyn, a Democrat. Morning.
Yes. My question is from the congressman's opinion. Good morning.
Good morning.
My question is, a couple of years ago, I read a wonderful article in Foreign Policy magazine predicting that Pakistan is a terrorist state. They have nuclear weapons. Do we consider them a threat? And we still afford them, I don't know, the specific amount in aid, but it's not working to our advantage. As we see, we have to go into a covert operation to...
Yeah, Evelyn, it's something we've been talking about. So what's your question for the congressman?
What does he think? Should we continue this aid for Pakistan?
Well, I wouldn't call Pakistan a terrorist state. It's a state where there's a wide range of opinion within the governing circles, some of which border on being pro-terrorist. I think, as I've said before, aid that goes to the right people in Pakistan, or aid that motivates people that are kind of the right people to do the right thing with a specific deliverable. Right now, I think the onus is on the Pakistani government to let us talk to bin Laden's youngest wife, who was wounded in this incident and is in Pakistani custody. Here is a woman who has spent many years with bin Laden, and I think would be a good source of information. But the Pakistani government is denying us access. So I think there are specific things we want from Pakistan, and we can judge each element of the Pakistani government separately based on the behavior of that element.
Do you expect to get a readout from intelligence officials about what they find on the computers and the other data sources that they were able to bring with them after the raid?
I would be surprised if that kind of detail was shared with many members of Congress. Anything that's even close to operational is shared with maybe 4 members of the House, 4 of the Senate. You know, they say if you want to keep a secret, don't tell anybody. 8 is plenty. And frankly, I'm engaged in trying to think in terms of what our policy response should be. So knowing how many zips bin Laden had on his computer, I'll leave that to others.
All right. Wyndham, Connecticut. Stephen, independent caller. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Representative Sherman and lady. And I think declassification is priority here. I mean, it will give Ambassador Crocker, who I think is one of the finest diplomats this country's ever produced, more political leverage. And here we have a John Glenn moment, a Neil Armstrong moment, and we're going to hide these heroes.
All right, let's get a response.
Well, we certainly need to hide the heroes that were involved in this raid, because what you don't want is to make the brother, the cousin, the child of one of those courageous SEALs a target for any kind of assassination or terrorist act. Everything possible should be done to conceal their identities. To some extent, every American is a little bit of a terrorist target. These terrorists would like to kill any of us, but we shouldn't make anyone more of a target just because they're related to one of these courageous men. We do have to make certain I think we've made an awful lot available. The next issue is whether to publish the picture of bin Laden. I don't think there's much of a downside. I don't think there's much of an upside. I have not seen the picture, but I'm sure it's gruesome, and I'm sure it won't convince the skeptics. There have been several photoshopped pictures of bin Laden with a bullet already published, which proves that certainly the CIA and frankly many high school kids with a computer can create a picture of this type. Still, I think I'd like to see it first, but I would, that I think is something we would declassify. But there are a lot of things about this raid that need to be classified. After all, it shows our techniques. How did we breach the walls? What kind of explosives were used in this raid? What communication system was used? Those are things that our enemies don't deserve to know.
Russell's a Republican in Big Rapids, Michigan. You're next.
I have a question. I would like to know why you are not telling the American people that bin Laden was in our own CIA during the Afghanistan engagement, and that's how more than likely we got his DNA.
Well, Russell, what proof do you have of that? What evidence?
Well, it's public knowledge, first of all.
It's public knowledge. But where did you read it? Where did you hear that?
On World Link TV.
And why do you think that's reliable?
I think that's more reliable than our general news that we're watching.
Okay. Skepticism there about our government.
I think that it is so shocking that we were on the same side as bin Laden in the 1980s that people have exaggerated just how closely we were connected. First, as the DNA, bin Laden has over 50 siblings, many of them half-siblings. His father had a number of wives. And many of those siblings actually resided in the United States up until 9/11. And I believe one came back for medical treatment even after 9/11. So whether the samples were drawn in Saudi Arabia or in the United States, testing of siblings, and a full sibling has the same genetic closeness to their sibling as a father to a child or a mother to a child, and we have paternity tests all the time. So where genetic material is 50% connected, as it is with siblings and with children, full siblings, you can do a very, very accurate test, and I believe, I haven't heard anything classified on this, but from press reports, I think that we had DNA from several of his siblings, or at least half-siblings. As to the cooperation with bin Laden, he was fighting on the same side. He was not on the CIA payroll, didn't need to be. He was from one of the richest families in Saudi Arabia. And at the time, the effort of pushing Russia out of Afghanistan was very popular in Saudi Arabia, presumably popular with the bin Laden family, popular with other donors in Saudi Arabia, popular with the Saudi family, with the Saudi royal family. So I don't think that he needed American dollars. There were others fighting on the same side, all trying to push Russians out of Afghanistan that were being aided by the United States. And the fact is, I mean, it's easy to go back now and say, in the 1980s, we shouldn't have been worried about the Soviet Union, we should have been worried about bin Laden. That would have taken more than a little foresight. And in fact, the Soviet Union and its capacity to destroy the whole world in a calamity with the United States was far more dangerous, and we faced a much greater danger in the 1980s, and we dealt with that in part in Afghanistan. That I would trade I would rather have our problems today than the security problems we faced in the 1980s.
Let me return to policy toward Pakistan and Afghanistan and read a part of the Washington Post piece this morning. This is a paragraph. It says, Pakistani officials have long seen a contradiction in Washington's effort to target those with whom it wishes to negotiate, and they fear that the U.S. goals an Afghan government more allied with India, Pakistan's historical adversary. The Pakistani government believes that Taliban insurgents are the only card it has to play in the game for long-term strategic influence in the region. What's your reaction to that?
There are several elements there. First, it does make sense to wage war against the Taliban as long as we're trying to build a stable Afghanistan. Now, there are those, and I lean in this direction, that think that nation building in Afghanistan is unlikely to be successful, and that we should be carrying on an anti-terrorism rather than a nation-building approach. But as long as we're in Afghanistan the way we are, we should be waging war against the Taliban and at the same time negotiating. And in fact, in many of our wars, we've carried on military operations as if there were no peace talks, and at the same time carried on back-level peace talks, World War I being an example. The other element as to, I mean, the question was...
well, I'm just wondering, given that paragraph that I just read, sort of what you think negotiations should be like with Pakistan, given these fears that they have?
Well, I think that we made a major strategic mistake when we went into Afghanistan and installed Karzai without consulting with the Pakistanis. There was no reason that the new government in Kabul had to be tilting toward India and against Pakistan. There was no reason to make Pakistan feel like it's under attack from two directions, and one of them is our ally in Karzai. And there was no particular reason why we should care whether the Afghan government was with India or with Pakistan on the issue of Kashmir or any other bilateral issue between those two countries. We now have the very difficult circumstance of trying to have a government in Kabul that is reasonably pro-American, anti-terrorist, and is not viewed as a security threat by the Pakistanis. And we complicated this unnecessarily. The very large embassy that India has in Kabul scares the Pakistanis. And you know, if you've had several wars with a country that has nuclear weapons and 1 billion people, there's a lot of national security planning that goes into that.
And when it comes to the Taliban, do you believe that the Taliban needs to renounce al-Qaeda in order to be brought into some sort of government deal between the Taliban and Karzai's government?
Well, I'm hoping that we only are bringing in elements of the Taliban, not the Taliban and Mullah Omar, et cetera. And yes, I think that we could have a different approach to Afghanistan. It's one I've advocated, where we simply maintain bases there in order to fight terrorism, but that we weren't focused on, are we bringing good government to Afghanistan? But if we're going to have 100,000 troops in Afghanistan, if we're going to be engaged in nation building in Afghanistan, you're going to have to see only anti-al-Qaeda elements in Kabul.
If we did that strategy in Afghanistan, are you advocating the same in Pakistan, where you just have bases there that just go into Pakistan and fight terrorism there as well?
Well, we don't have military bases in Pakistan. I think
or at least in Afghanistan and go into Pakistan.
Well, it's clear that a lot of people have viewed Pakistan as saying, oh yeah, Pakistan's important, it's right next to Afghanistan. I view it the other way around. I think Afghanistan's important because it's right next to Pakistan. Pakistan is the schizophrenic nuclear power. And Pakistan turns out to be the place bin Laden was hiding. So I think having bases in Afghanistan to deal with terrorists in Afghanistan and in Pakistan is going to be helpful.
All right, Stone County, Arkansas. Diane, independent caller, you're next. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you, Representative Brad Sherman from California, for the wonderful job that you're doing, the knowledge that you have, sir, and that you're imparting to the American people. My question is, can we expect to see more photos of top al-Qaeda, Taliban, and other terror group photos that America and the world need to be on alert for? As far as the death photo of Osama bin Laden, I vote no. Can we see more reports from on the Pakistani government and the problems within them?
Okay, we'll leave it there, Diane. We'll start with your first question.
Well, the internet is filled with pictures of those involved in the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, starting with Zawahiri, who has now taken over Al-Qaeda. And every newspaper is just filled with analysis of Pakistan. So we may not have security, we may not have a balanced budget, but boy, we've got a lot of reading material.
The FBI, we showed this to our viewers on Monday, the FBI has on their website the most wanted terrorists and pictures of them as well. Let's go to Gainesville, Florida. Stephen, Democrat, go ahead.
So 3 quick points. The first is about this picture thing. I personally don't need to see the picture of Osama bin Laden. However, I think that the sooner that we put this behind us and just put it out there for people, we can move on to the important questions. I mean, we've spent a lot of time this morning on CSPAN, and we will continue with this issue until we can move on to find out what really Pakistan really knew. As far as the funding, this foreign aid is concerned, I personally am for cutting off aid completely in changing our foreign policy and following more along the lines of what Ron Paul follows, even though I'm a Democrat. And you said, and this is my question, I guess, to the representative, and that is, we continue to hear people when they talk about foreign aid saying that there would be strings attached. I personally think that's a fallacy. That it's kind of like the idea of somebody saying that they're going to give me $1,000, but I can only spend that on groceries, when then that in return I can turn around and buy guns with my income. I think this idea of us putting strings attached to foreign aid is just a complete fallacy, and I was wondering what you think about that.
Well, let's take that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, strings attached does not just mean that our dollars are used to buy something in particular, because money is fungible. Strings attached can mean this aid is going to Pakistan only if Pakistan does X, Y, or Z. And whether that is a thorough investigation of who in the Pakistani military and intelligence service knew or should have known. Who is it that's responsible for knowing that somebody's building a $1 million compound just a couple hundred yards away from the front gate of the Pakistan Military Academy? We need to see that kind of investigation. So I think that strings mean not this is just how you spend the money, but rather this money is made available to you if you engage in the kind of behavior that we'd like to see. As to Ron Paul's approach and isolationism, I don't think that we can hide or escape. We are going to be the biggest free country in the world, the most prominent free country in the world, and even if we had some sort of low-profile foreign policy, 9/11 still would have occurred. And so there are smaller countries. I mean, if this was Belgium C-SPAN, we could talk about whether Belgium could have such a low-profile foreign policy that terrorists wouldn't notice and it wouldn't matter. But we're the United States, and people are going to notice us, and if they're Al-Qaeda-style terrorists, we're going to have to fight them.
Hamden, Connecticut. Tony, Republican, you're next.
Hi. Good morning. The reason why I'm calling is no one has brought to the attention of the people that the mission was to kill bin Laden and not to capture him. I'm a firm believer, like other people, that killing bin Laden was to shut up any information that he knew. And I think it goes back to 1993 when Madeleine Albright squealed and said we were going to bomb his site. People believe quite readily that Bill Clinton had a deal with Osama bin Laden, and they want to hide that and make sure that that information never gets out. I'm sorry to say this morning, but I would like an answer as to why we couldn't capture this man who had unbelievable information to give us.
Well, I believe that an attempt was made to capture him, and certainly should have been. I don't think that there's, I don't buy the conspiracy theory. We certainly took every bit of information that could be taken, and I don't think our CIA would find information in there of explosive type that the gentleman is talking about, and that would remain concealed both under this administration and every subsequent administration. So, and of course, the prior administration for 8 years did not reveal any secret bin Laden, Bill Clinton detente, and certainly if there was evidence of that that the caller's aware of, I'm sure that the George Bush National Security team was aware of it too, and chose not to disclose it. And I assure you there was enough animosity in parts of that administration toward President Clinton that if they had such information, they would have revealed it.
Front page of the Baltimore Sun has this headline: bin Laden's surrender was nearly impossible because of the rules of engagement. One official is quoted as saying that he would have had to have been naked for them to allow him to surrender because of fears of a suicide bomb attached to him, or a trap in the room that he was found in. So let's go to Kansas City. Velma, Democrat caller, you're up next for Congressman Brad Sherman.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can,
I
Velma.
hear you, Velma.
Good morning, Representative. I'll be quick. I'm calling on my cell phone. My battery is low. The reason that I'm calling, I disagree with you, Representative Brandman. I think that's your name. The reason being is because you said that tainted for people with mental disabilities. Sir, point is people do things whether they have disabilities or not. And my phone number is 913-233-0953. Now, please note this number, 2008.
All right, Velma,
Are
let's
you
just get
sure
it.
you want to give out those numbers?
Let's not do that.
First, my name is Brad Sherman. I'm from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. And second, I don't think I've mentioned mental disability.
I think she was referring to schizophrenia.
Oh, well, the term schizophrenia has a very precise meaning in psychiatry. I'm using it in the clinical diplomatic split personality, and I'm not educated in the psychiatric profession, but rather the colloquial. This is a split personality Pakistan government.
I want to show our viewers another headline in the Washington Post this morning on Libya. Libyan rebels ask global donors for $3 billion. Would you endorse the idea of giving the Libyan rebels money?
Well, we ought to, if we're going to give them any money, give them Libya's money. We seized $33 billion that Gaddafi was dumb enough to invest in the United States, leave here, and put in a form where we could find it. That money's been frozen, and it is simply outrageous that it has not been used to fund the operations we've conducted so far in Libya. And don't let the administration fool you that these operations have cost less than $1 billion. The operations in Libya, if you do a full cost accounting, are billions of dollars, should not be paid for by the U.S. taxpayer, should be paid for by these assets. And the Benghazi rebels should have already been asked to, or on their own, directed us to use that money. And then we've announced $25 million, I realize that's a small amount, of economic aid to the rebels. If they need $25 million, it should come from these Gaddafi assets. It's simply outrageous that taxpayer money is being kept, is being used for these purposes. The State Department response is that this $33 billion should be held for the benefit of the Libyan people. Well, by God, if there's anything we're doing in Libya that isn't for the benefit of the Libyan people, we should stop doing it. But since it is for the benefit of the Libyan people, it should be these assets that pay for it, whether it be the $25 million, whether it be the many billions we've spent on military operations, or whether it be the $3 billion that we may or may not choose to provide them. And the other thing we should be demanding of the Benghazi Rebel Council not only is that they direct and authorize, because this provides us with a little more political cover, that this $33 billion of Gaddafi money be used to pay our costs and whatever economic disbursements are necessary, but they also need to disgorge people like al-Hasidi and others who have American blood on their hands, who are fighting as part of the rebel cause. So we need to be a little tougher in how we relate to these actions in Libya.
Let's go on to Plymouth, Maryland. Noel, Republican, morning.
Good morning, Congressman Sherman. I appreciate, this is first to C-SPAN. I appreciate your bringing people, two congressmen this morning on C-SPAN, who spoke very clearly. And going back to Pakistan for Congressman Sherman, I agree with his schizophrenic analysis, and I believe that Ambassador Crocker has a big job to make sure the money that we give to Pakistan, I believe we still have to, falls in the right hand. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Manassas, Virginia. Michael, an independent. You're next.
Yeah, good morning. And first, I'd like to thank C-SPAN for the excellent telejournalism job they're doing, and I'd like to thank Representative Sherman for the job that he does. If I may clear something up very quickly, I'm a psychiatric nurse coincidentally. And schizophrenia does not necessarily mean a split personality. It's more of a delusional process of hallucinations and a feeling of dread, things like that. Just to cover that.
As I said before, I'm using it in the most colloquial sense as a diplomatic, not a psychiatric term.
I appreciate that, Representative. And which also leads me into this whole thing about this bloodbath that's going on. I come from the 60s, so I have this kind of naive attitude of, we're all focusing on the differences that we have and not the commonalities that we have. And I'm sure you're aware of that in the work that you do. And I don't hear anything about the commonalities, the different countries. Also, I just wanted to comment, too, I believe you made a comment about Pakistan not ending in an N as it ends in an S. And I think that was very insightful. I really appreciate that. Because you hear all the time other countries and our country, the talk is constantly of the more well-known people, and sometimes we seem to forget the everyday people, and I don't want to say common because that's kind of like a, I don't know, put down or whatever.
We get your point, Michael. We'll have the Congressman respond.
We do have a lot of commonality with a lot of people in Pakistan. I mean, these are people who have put their lives on the line against terrorism, whether it be Benazir Bhutto, who went back to Pakistan knowing that she might be subject to assassination, whether it is several high-ranking members of the Pakistani government or their state governments that have called for a change in the blasphemy law that's used it says that execution is the penalty for allegedly defaming Islam, and then very often just a person claims that a Christian or a Hindu who happens to be living in Pakistan, and there's no particular proof, said something adverse to Islam or the Prophet of Islam, and is subject to possible execution. And those who spoke out against this blasphemy law have themselves been assassinated, in one case by the victim's own bodyguards. And so there are those on the front line in Pakistan who are taking risks beyond that we take here in America to fight a level of extremism that we don't have commonality with.
Lovettsville, Virginia. John, a Republican. Morning.
Yes, good morning, Representative Sherman. It's a pleasure to speak with you. My name is John Sherman, amusingly. I just wanted to ask about the one thing that this made me think of course, I was very pleased to hear of that we got Osama bin Laden. But the one thing I was rather curious about is if the government should have actually been a little bit quiet about this for a little while and maybe tried to act on some of the intelligence that they gathered at his home.
We'll see what the Congressman thinks.
Oh, I think Al-Qaeda would have been aware of this raid. There are a lot of things you want to try to keep private, but certainly if you start with the belief that there are at least a few elements in the ISI, the Pakistani intelligence service, that were aware of this compound, they certainly would have been aware of the raid on the compound. And I think maybe we could have concealed for an additional hour or two what had happened, but this was going to be worldwide news.
Connie is a Democrat watching us in Bowie, Maryland. Welcome to the conversation.
Good morning, Congressman. I have three things I'd like to ask you. Now that we got bin Laden, do you think that because of our debt that we'll start bringing some of our soldiers home, and the ones around the world that aren't needed, like in Germany and places like that? I know we still need them in Saudi Arabia and in Korea. And another thing I wanted to ask you, the congressman that was there before you, said we only spent 1.5 trillion on the war. But if I'm not mistaken, before Obama came, we'd already spent $3 trillion. And another thing I want to ask you, don't we take in 2.5 trillion a year? And if that's the case, we have given in tax breaks and tax breaks for the rich and tax subsidies around to everyone, like the breaks that we get for mortgages and for our children and stuff like that. And we have just given our tax money away, which is supposed to pay down on our debt.
Okay, Connie, we'll try to get a response to those.
I'm only going to be able to respond to some of the questions that Connie raises because she raised so few. First, it's possible that there'll be more effort to withdraw from Afghanistan now that bin Laden has been killed. If you want to disbelieve the comments coming from our administration that no one in Pakistan tipped us off about this or knew that the raid was coming, there are at least a few in Pakistan who very much want us out of Afghanistan. And a few of them might have realized that bin Laden's death would push us in that direction. Whether those people did anything to help us get bin Laden is something that we'll find out when the Sikh files are published decades from now.
Let's just take the war spending. Because you referred to Congressman Schweikert before saying that we've spent about 1.5 trillion. I think he was saying 1.5 trillion on Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya combined. And she was wondering if that number includes when the spending on wars was not part of the budget.
Well, one thing we don't do is a very good cost accounting of the cost of these wars. And the smallest of the wars being Libya, the announcement from the administration that this has cost us less than $1 billion is absurd. And they're doing a better job of accounting for Afghanistan and Iraq, but for Libya, they're saying the salary being paid to the pilot who's flying over Libya doesn't count as a cost of the Libyan war. Well, you can say, well, you'd pay the guy anyway, he's in the Air Force. But the fact is that if you use marginal cost accounting, you come up with a small number for these wars. If you look at full cost, you come up with a much larger number. And I'm sure it's more than, even conservatively determined, more than $1.5 trillion for all three wars.
Before we let you go, Congressman, our next topic is the future of Guantanamo Bay. What's the answer to that question for you?
Nobody's come up with a good answer. And I suspect that we had a president who was very much in favor of what we were doing in Guantanamo. We have now a president who's very much opposed, and both of them end up doing the same thing. That's because no real alternative has arisen, and frankly, if I had a great answer, I'd be over there doing a press conference about it.
All right, Brad Sherman, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is our topic. Coming up next, the future of Guantanamo. But first, a news update from C-SPAN Radio.
17 minutes past 9 a.m. Eastern Time.